My name is Emily Carter. I am 68 years old, and for more than 30 years I served as a judge. My entire career was built on listening carefully, weighing every fact, and never making a decision based on emotion alone. I believed that if you treated people fairly, life would eventually return that fairness to you. I was wrong. If someone had told me that the most painful betrayal of my life would come from my own family, I would have laughed. I spent decades sentencing criminals, dealing with fraud, abuse, and greed. I thought I understood how deception worked. But nothing prepares you for betrayal when it comes from your own child. It all started on a rainy Tuesday morning. I was sitting in my kitchen with a cup of coffee, watching raindrops slide down the window. Retirement had been quieter than I expected. Some mornings I enjoyed the silence. Other mornings it felt unbearably loud. My husband, Daniel, had passed away 4 years earlier after a long battle with cancer. We had been married for 42 years. Losing him felt like losing half of my memory. The house was still full of him. His favourite chair remained exactly where he had left it. His old reading glasses still rested on the bookshelf. Even after all those years, I couldn't bring myself to move them. Our only son, Michael, lived about 40 minutes away with his wife, Rebecca, and our 2 grandchildren. At least, that's what I told people. The truth was much more complicated. When Daniel died, Michael visited almost every weekend. He helped with repairs, mowed the lawn, fixed leaking faucets, and insisted I call him if I needed anything. For a while, I believed I wasn't alone. Then things slowly changed. The phone calls became shorter. Weekend visits became monthly visits. Monthly visits became holidays. Eventually, even birthdays felt like appointments squeezed between more important plans. I tried not to complain. People have jobs, families grow, children become busy. That's simply life. Or at least, that's what I kept telling myself. One afternoon, Michael called unexpectedly. His voice sounded cheerful. "Mom, Rebecca and I have been talking. We think it's time you stop worrying about the house." I smiled. I wasn't worried. "You don't have to pretend with me." "I'm not pretending." "You shouldn't be living alone anymore." It sounded caring, reasonable. Exactly the kind of conversation many aging parents eventually have with their children. He suggested moving closer to them. He talked about safety, about convenience, about spending more time together. Every sentence sounded thoughtful, almost rehearsed. Looking back now, I realized something that should have alarmed me immediately. He never once asked what I wanted. Instead, he kept explaining what would be best for me. After 33 years in a courtroom, I had learned to pay attention not only to words, but also to what people carefully avoided saying. Michael never asked whether I was happy. He never asked whether I wanted to leave the home where Daniel and I had built our lives. He simply assumed the decision had already been made. A week later, they came for dinner. Rebecca brought flowers. The children hugged me. Everything looked like the perfect family gathering. During dessert, Rebecca casually placed a folder on the table. "I've been looking at some options," she said with a warm smile. Inside were brochures for retirement communities, luxury senior apartments, assisted living facilities. Everything was beautifully printed, beautiful enough to distract someone from asking the obvious question. Who had decided I needed any of this? I closed the folder gently. "I appreciate the effort," I said, "but I'm not planning to move." The room became strangely quiet. Michael forced a smile. Rebecca looked down at her coffee. For just a second, I saw something cross her face. Not disappointment, not concern, frustration. It disappeared almost instantly. But once you've spent decades watching witnesses hide the truth, even a single second can tell you everything. At that moment, I didn't yet know what they were planning. I only knew one thing. For the first time in my life, my own family looked at me less like a mother and more like an obstacle. 3 days passed after that dinner. Michael didn't call. Rebecca didn't text. The silence should have made me feel relieved. Instead, it made me nervous. When people stop trying to convince you, sometimes it's because they've changed their strategy. On Thursday morning, I decided to clean Daniel's old office. It was the only room in the house I had avoided since his passing. Every drawer held another memory. Old photographs, retirement cards, letters we had exchanged while he travelled for work decades ago. Then I reached the bottom drawer of his desk. It was locked. That surprised me. Daniel had never locked anything in our home. After searching for a few minutes, I found a small brass key taped beneath the desk, exactly where he always hid spare keys. The lock clicked open. Inside was a single leather folder, not the blue folder I had been searching for, a brown one. On the cover, Daniel had written only one word: family. I smiled without realizing it. Trust Daniel to organize even his private thoughts. Inside were dozens of documents, old insurance papers, investment summaries, letters from our attorney, and finally, an envelope with my name written in his handwriting. Emily, if you're reading this, I'm probably no longer here. For a long moment, I couldn't bring myself to open it. My hands were shaking. Finally, I unfolded the letter. You know me well enough to understand that I never worried much about money. I worried about people. Money only matters because of what it makes people willing to do. I stopped reading. Daniel wasn't talking about finances. He was warning me. I continued. If anyone ever pressures you to make quick decisions about this house, slow down. Never sign anything without reading every page yourself, even if the request comes from someone you love. I felt a chill run through my body. Daniel had written those words almost 6 years earlier, long before he became sick, long before anyone mentioned retirement communities. Why had he felt the need to write that? I searched the folder again. Near the back, I found another sealed envelope. This one was addressed to both Michael and me. It had never been opened. The seal was still intact. That didn't make sense. If Daniel intended Michael to read it, why had my son never mentioned it? I placed both envelopes back into the folder. Something told me not to confront Michael yet, not until I understood what I was looking at. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was Rebecca. Her voice sounded unusually cheerful. Emily, I was wondering if we could stop by tomorrow. We? Michael and I. What for? We found someone who can give you a free home valuation. I looked toward the window. Rain had started falling again. My home isn't for sale. Oh, it's just information. I don't need it. You never know. Her tone remained pleasant. Too pleasant. I had heard that tone before. Attorneys sometimes used it while asking witnesses harmless-looking questions. Every word sounded innocent. Every word had a purpose. I'll think about it, I replied. Wonderful. Before hanging up, she added one sentence that stayed with me for the rest of the evening. It'll make future decisions much easier. Future decisions. Not your decision. Future decisions. Plural. I opened my notebook again. Every strange conversation went onto another page. Every unusual phrase. Every unexpected visit. Every missing document. By sunset, I had already filled 7 pages. Looking at them together, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Individually, Nothing seemed alarming. Together, it looked less like concern and more like preparation. For what? I still didn't know. But after 33 years as a judge, I had learned something that never failed. People can hide the truth. They cannot hide patterns. And someone was leaving far too many behind. The following morning, I drove to Richard Lawson's office. Although he had officially retired 2 years earlier, he still kept a small practice downtown. Some habits never leave people who spend their lives working with the law. When I arrived, he was already waiting with 2 cups of coffee. "You sounded serious on the phone," he said. "I think I found something." I placed Daniel's letter and the notebook on his desk. Richard read every page without interrupting. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Emily, I've known you for over 30 years. You don't imagine patterns. You notice them." That wasn't the reassurance I wanted. It was the confirmation I feared. He opened his computer and typed the name Rebecca had mentioned during our dinner. Nothing unusual. Then he searched Cedar Bridge Holdings. Several companies appeared, each one connected to another. Different names, different addresses, the same people. Richard frowned. "I've seen this structure before. What does it mean?" "They create several companies, so it's harder to see who actually owns them." He clicked another document, then another. Finally, he stopped. "That's interesting." "What?" "This company purchased 12 houses during the last 18 months. 12? He nodded. 9 of the previous owners were over 65. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Coincidence? I don't believe much in coincidence anymore. He printed several pages and handed them to me. Every property followed a similar timeline. Family disagreement, quick sale, company purchase, renovation, resale a few months later. The profits were enormous. Thousands. Sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars. Richard folded his hands. "I'm not saying they've broken the law, but they know exactly how to find vulnerable situations." I looked at the papers. One question kept repeating in my mind. How had Michael and Rebecca become involved with them? As if reading my thoughts, Richard spoke again. "Have they asked you to sign anything yet?" "No." "Good. Then don't." "I wasn't planning to. I mean anything. Even something that looks harmless. Power of attorney, insurance forms, medical paperwork, home inspections, anything. People often sign documents because they trust the person standing beside them, not because they understand the document itself." I thanked Richard and drove home. Halfway there, my phone rang. It was Michael. "Mum, we're having dinner at our house tonight. I already have plans." "You don't?" The answer came too quickly. "I'd really rather stay home." Rebecca's voice suddenly joined the call. "We made your favorite roast." I almost laughed. She didn't even know my favorite meal. "Another time." There was a long silence. Then Michael spoke again. "We've already invited someone." "Who?" "Our financial advisor." I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. "Why would I have dinner with your financial advisor?" "He has some ideas." I didn't ask for ideas. "He just wants to help." Help. That word again. Everyone wanted to help. Nobody wanted to listen. "I won't be coming." Before either of them could answer, I ended the call. When I arrived home, something immediately felt wrong. The front gate was open. I was certain I had closed it. Slowly, I walked toward the porch. Nothing appeared disturbed. The front door was still locked. Windows were closed. Everything looked exactly as I had left it. Almost. Then I noticed the flower pot beside the entrance. Daniel always kept a spare house key underneath it, Only 3 people knew that: Daniel, me, and Michael. The flower pot had been moved only a few inches. Most people would never notice. I did. Carefully, I lifted it. The spare key was still there. But it wasn't sitting the way I had left it. Someone had picked it up and put it back. I stood frozen on the porch. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was everything. That evening, I moved the spare key. I didn't tell anyone, not even Richard. As the sun disappeared behind the trees, I wrote one final sentence in my notebook. Someone expected to enter my house without asking. I closed the notebook. For the first time since Daniel's death, I locked every door, checked every window, and realized something that frightened me more than any courtroom case I had ever heard. This wasn't about convincing me to sell. Someone had already started acting, as if my house no longer belonged to me. The next morning, I drove straight to my insurance company's local office. The representative from the phone call had already prepared my file. A young woman named Melissa greeted me politely. "Mrs. Carter, thank you for coming in." "I've already reviewed your account," I smiled. "Please, tell me exactly what happened." She hesitated, then turned the monitor toward me. "There was a request to update your emergency contact." "I know. But here's the unusual part." She opened another document. The request wasn't submitted online. It wasn't mailed. It was delivered in person. My heart skipped a beat. "In person?" "Yes." "Who brought it?" "I'm sorry. We don't record names. But we do scan every authorization form." She clicked another button. A PDF appeared on the screen. At the bottom, my signature, or at least something that looked almost identical to it. I stared at it for several seconds. It looked convincing. The same elegant curves, the same long stroke beneath my last name. Anyone glancing at it would believe it belonged to me, but I knew every movement of my own handwriting. For 33 years, I had signed thousands of judicial orders. This wasn't my signature. It was an imitation, a very good one, but not mine. Melissa quietly asked, "Mrs. Carter, is there a problem?" I looked directly at her. "I never signed this." Her expression changed immediately. She called her supervisor. Within minutes, a grey-haired manager joined us. He studied the document carefully. "If this signature is fraudulent, we'll have to begin an internal investigation." I nodded. "I'd appreciate that." As I gathered my papers, he added one more sentence. "There's something else. The person who submitted the form also requested information about adding another authorized contact." I froze. Did they succeed? No. The request was rejected because additional identification was required. Another authorized contact. Someone had already tried to place another person on my account. I thanked both of them and walked outside. The cold autumn air hit my face. For the first time, this no longer felt like a misunderstanding. Someone had already begun changing my legal records, and they had expected me never to notice. That afternoon, I met Richard again. He examined the copied signature under a magnifying glass. After nearly 5 minutes, he quietly smiled. "Emily." "What?" "Whoever forged this made one tiny mistake." He pointed to the final letter of my last name. "You always lift your pen before finishing. This signature doesn't." I looked again. He was right. The line never broke. It flowed straight through, a tiny detail, almost invisible, but impossible for me to miss. Richard leaned back. "Judges notice details. So do document examiners. If this ever reaches court, that's not going to survive expert analysis." I finally allowed myself to breathe. For the first time in days, I had evidence, not proof, but evidence, enough to keep digging. That evening, I returned home just before sunset. Something white was sticking out of my mailbox. Inside was a plain envelope, no stamp, no return address, only my name, written by hand. I opened it carefully. There was no letter, only a single business card. On the front, Cedar Bridge Holdings. On the back, someone had written 6 words. Ask your son about October 14th. No signature, no explanation, nothing else. I looked at the date again. October 14th. Why did it sound familiar? I hurried inside, opened my old calendar, turned to October. Then I found it. October 14th, the day Michael and Rebecca insisted I spend the afternoon with them, while, according to my security camera, someone had walked across my property, someone I still hadn't identified. I slowly closed the calendar. Until now, I believed I was investigating a plan. Now, someone else was trying to help me expose it. The only question was, why were they staying hidden? And what did they know? That I didn't? I didn't sleep that night. The anonymous note lay on my kitchen table. Ask your son about October 14th. I must have read those 6 words 50 times. The next morning, I made one decision. I wasn't going to confront Michael with accusations. Not yet. For 33 years, I had watched people destroy their own credibility by speaking too soon. Evidence first, questions later. I opened the security camera archive. The footage from October 14th was still there. At exactly 2:17 p.m., a black SUV pulled into my driveway. Not Michael's, not Rebecca's. A man stepped out carrying a leather portfolio. He walked around my house slowly. He photographed the windows, the roof, the backyard, even the mailbox. Then, a few minutes later, Rebecca arrived. She greeted him with a smile. They spoke for nearly 10 minutes. Michael wasn't with them. The two of them walked around my property together, pointing, measuring, taking notes. I paused the video, then rewound it, again and again. Rebecca wasn't simply showing someone the house. She was giving a presentation. When the meeting ended, the stranger handed her a folder. She placed it inside her bag. Then both vehicles disappeared. I immediately called Richard. An hour later, he was sitting beside me watching the footage. When it ended, he remained silent. Finally, he spoke. Emily, I know that man. You do? He nodded. His name is Victor Hale. He consults for investment companies. Cedar Bridge? Richard looked at me. I believe so. The room suddenly felt colder. So this wasn't an accident. No. It was preparation. That evening, Michael called. Mom, can we come over? For what? We need to talk? So do I. An hour later, Michael and Rebecca were sitting across from me in the living room. No coffee. No small talk. I placed my notebook on the table. Then the printed insurance document. Then the security camera photographs. Finally, the anonymous business card. Neither of them spoke. I looked at Michael. Would you like to tell me what happened on October 14th? His face turned pale. Rebecca looked at him. He looked at her. For almost 20 seconds. Nobody said a word. Then Michael quietly whispered, I didn't know. I frowned. You didn't know what? They told us. They told us they were only preparing an estimate. Rebecca suddenly interrupted. We never agreed to sell your house. I looked directly at her. I didn't ask whether you agreed. I asked why a consultant was inspecting my property while I was intentionally kept away. Silence. Again. Rebecca's confidence disappeared. We thought, it would help convince you, Convince me of what? That selling was the right decision. Michael lowered his head. We were worried about you. No, I answered calmly. You were worried about the house. Neither of them denied it. That hurt more than any argument could have. I slowly opened Daniel's letter, then handed it to Michael. He read every word. Halfway through, his eyes filled with tears. I never knew this existed. I believe you. Rebecca quietly stood. I should leave. I nodded. Yes. She walked to the door without another word. Michael remained seated. For the first time since Daniel's funeral. He cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like a man who had finally realized how far he had allowed someone else to lead him. Weeks later, the insurance company completed its investigation. The authorization form had indeed been fraudulent. The changes were reversed. Richard helped me notify the appropriate authorities. As for Cedar Bridge Holdings, I later learned they quietly closed several local operations after multiple complaints. Whether anything more happened, I honestly don't know. I never followed the case. I had already won the only battle that truly mattered. My home remained mine. More importantly, my judgment remained my own. Michael visited every Sunday after that. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we sat in silence. Trust isn't rebuilt by promises. It's rebuilt by consistency. Rebecca and Michael eventually separated. I never celebrated that. Broken families are never victories. Months later, Michael planted new roses beside the old ones Daniel had once planted. Neither of us said much that afternoon. We didn't need to. As I watched him working in the garden, I remembered something Daniel had written in his final letter. People reveal who they are when money enters the room. For a while, I believed that sentence was about betrayal. Now I understand, it was really about choices. Every person eventually chooses what matters most: money, fear, convenience, or family. I nearly lost mine. Not because strangers tried to take my home, but because the people I loved stopped asking what I wanted. If there's one lesson this experience taught me, it's this. Never surrender your independence simply because someone tells you it's for your own good. Ask questions. Read every document. Trust your instincts. And remember, the people who truly love you will never be afraid of your questions. The end.